He was born in the quiet Cambodian village of Prexbov, near the town of Kampong Thom, on May 19, 1925. His birth name was Salithsar. His father, Loth, was a relatively prosperous farmer, owning rice fields and working closely with Buddhist clergy. His mother, Sok Nem, was deeply religious and devout. As a boy, he lived comfortably by rural standards. But that child would vanish into history, replaced by a man who led a regime of darkness, a man known to the world as Pol Pot. Education, from first class to final step. Pol Pot began his early education in Buddhist monasteries, where he learned basic Khmer and Buddhist teachings. At the age of 9, he left the monastery to attend a Catholic school in Phnom Penh, the capital city. There he was introduced to Western-style education and the French language, which was the language of colonial power in Cambodia at the time. Though not academically exceptional, he advanced through middle and secondary school and earned a scholarship to study in France in 1949. He traveled to Paris and enrolled at the École Française d'Électronique, intending to study radio technology. But academics soon became secondary. In the cafes and dormitories of post-war Paris, he found himself swept up in politics. He joined a circle of radical Cambodian students who were deeply influenced by Marxism and anti-colonialism. In France, Salithsar did not distinguish himself as a scholar. He failed his courses repeatedly and never completed his degree. But politically, he thrived. He joined the French Communist Party and became part of a student group that laid the intellectual groundwork for revolution in Cambodia. In 1953, he returned to Cambodia, not with a diploma, but with a mission. How he became a dictator. Upon returning home, Cambodia was undergoing massive changes. The country had just gained independence from France. King Norodom Sihanouk was in power, and while he presented himself as a nationalist, many viewed his government as corrupt and authoritarian. Salithsar began working as a teacher in Phnom Penh, where he taught history and geography. But by night, he engaged in underground politics. He joined the Indochinese Communist Party and soon became involved with its Cambodian branch, which later evolved into the Kampuchean People's Revolutionary Party. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Salithsar adopted various aliases. Eventually, he took on the name Pol Pot. He traveled to rural areas to build revolutionary cells, slowly preparing for an armed struggle. His ideology was a mixture of Marxist-Leninist doctrine and radical agrarian nationalism. He believed Cambodia could leap into a pure form of communism by erasing modern society and starting over from the soil. By the mid-1960s, Pol Pot had become one of the top leaders of the Communist Party of Kampuchea. He disappeared into the jungle and began organizing guerrilla warfare against the central government. He recruited poor peasants, trained armed fighters, and laid the foundation of what would later be known as the Khmer Rouge. The Cambodian Civil War erupted in 1970, when General Lon Nol, with American backing, overthrew Prince Sihanouk. The Khmer Rouge capitalized on the chaos, portraying themselves as national saviors. They gained rural support by promising land reform, an end to corruption, and resistance against foreign interference. As the Vietnam War spilled across the Cambodian border, American bombing campaigns devastated the countryside. Thousands of civilians died. Villages were wiped out. This devastation swelled Khmer Rouge recruitment, as many Cambodians blamed Lon Nol and the United States for their suffering. On April 17, 1975, Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge entered Phnom Penh in victory. They were welcomed as liberators. But the celebration would not last. Within hours, the Khmer Rouge began evacuating the city. hospitals, schools, markets all emptied. Millions were forced to march into the countryside. The plan was monstrous in its simplicity: erase everything modern and rebuild Cambodia as a communist utopia of peasants and purity. Pol Pot was now the absolute ruler of Cambodia, though he rarely appeared in public. The country he ruled would be renamed Democratic Kampuchea. After acquiring dictatorship, rule over army and country. Once in power, Pol Pot launched one of the most radical and catastrophic social experiments in human history. He envisioned a society without cities, money, religion, or private property. Inspired by a warped interpretation of Maoist thought, he believed that by eliminating inequality through force, Cambodia could be reborn. To achieve this, the Khmer Rouge evacuated all urban centers. Over 2 million people were marched into the countryside. Doctors, teachers, engineers, and intellectuals were forced to become farmers overnight. Anyone who resisted or simply wore glasses, a symbol of literacy, was deemed an enemy of the revolution. The state abolished money, banned religious worship, destroyed temples, and executed monks. Families were broken apart, children separated from parents and raised by the state. Marriages were arranged by party officials. Love and individuality were crimes. Agricultural collectives were created, but planning was chaotic and unrealistic. People worked long hours on meager rations. Starvation spread. Disease was rampant. The death toll climbed silently behind the barbed wires and in the endless rice fields. Pol Pot ruled through secrecy and terror. The regime established prisons like Tuol Sleng, known as S21, where thousands were tortured and forced to confess imaginary crimes. After confession, they were sent to the killing fields, remote sites where they were executed and buried in mass graves. Bullets were expensive, so victims were often bludgeoned with farm tools. Even among the Khmer Rouge ranks, paranoia reigned. Pol Pot trusted no one. Senior officials were purged. Entire villages accused of disloyalty were wiped out. By 1979, nearly 2 million Cambodians, 1 in 4 citizens, had died from execution, starvation, disease, or overwork. And still, Pol Pot insisted it was all necessary. He claimed the revolution was under threat, that the purity of the nation had to be protected. But the regime was collapsing. Border clashes with Vietnam escalated into full-scale war. In January 1979, the Vietnamese army invaded Cambodia and captured Phnom Penh. The Khmer Rouge fled to the jungles near the Thai border. Pol Pot lost his state, but not his power. For nearly 2 more decades, he lived in hiding, still commanding remnants of the Khmer Rouge from remote camps, supported by foreign governments opposed to Vietnamese influence. Even after his crimes were exposed to the world, he continued to justify his actions as mistakes made in pursuit of a noble goal. List of bad deeds. Engineered the deaths of approximately 2 million Cambodians through execution, starvation, and forced labor. Ordered the evacuation of all cities and abolished money, markets, religion, and education. Destroyed cultural institutions, religious temples, and ancient traditions. Established torture centers such as Tuol Sleng, where at least 14,000 people were tortured and killed. Purged his own party members in brutal internal executions. Starved the population by enforcing failed agricultural policies and refusing international aid. Encouraged children to spy on their parents and neighbors to inform the regime. Attempted to erase the history and identity of an entire nation in the name of revolutionary purity. List of good deeds. Very few acts under Pol Pot's rule can be interpreted as good. Some observers note that his early messaging against corruption, foreign exploitation, and inequality appealed to rural Cambodians who had long been neglected by urban elites. He did promote national independence and sought to remove colonial influence, but these goals were pursued with such brutality and delusion that they were buried beneath the weight of mass graves. Death date and cause. Pol Pot died on April 15, 1998, in the jungles of northern Cambodia. He had been placed under house arrest by former Khmer Rouge members who had turned against him. According to reports, he died of a heart attack in his sleep, though some speculate he may have taken poison to avoid being handed over to international authorities. No formal autopsy was performed. Where buried? Pol Pot was cremated in a crude ceremony near the Thai-Cambodian border. His remains were burned on a pile of tires and wood in a bamboo shed. There is no monument, no tombstone, only ashes in the jungle where history tried to bury his name.